Imagine if after September 11th, President George W. Bush had decided that it just wasn't his job to be the president of New York City because its residents weren't his people. Or if Bill Clinton had decided not to head to Oklahoma City after Timothy McVeigh blew up a federal building there because it wasn't a state in which he'd prevailed. Or if President Obama had said that Newtown wasn't his part of the state of Connecticut and he'd stayed away after the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. It hurts to even say those words out loud because it would never have happened. Of course, it didn't happen. All those men understood that it was their job to lead America, all Americans, through her most painful days, and that their most fundamental duty was to protect all citizens of this country from threats, foreign and domestic. Sometimes it's important to remind ourselves how utterly freakish it is that the current American president doesn't see the presidency that way. Case in point, this weekend, Donald Trump praised his supporters and failed to condemn acts of violence and provocation in the tinderbox that is Donald Trump's America. Joe Biden today sounding all of the presidential notes that Donald Trump can't or won't on the raging pandemic and the unrest on American streets.
Rioting is not protesting. Looting is not protesting. Setting fires is not protesting. None of this is protesting. It's lawlessness, plain and simple. And those who do it should be prosecuted. Violence will not bring change. Does anyone believe there'll be less violence in America if Donald Trump is reelected? We need justice in America. We need safety in America. We're facing multiple crises. Crises under Donald Trump have kept multiplying. The common thread, the incumbent president who makes things worse, not better. An incumbent president who sows chaos rather than providing order. An incumbent president who fails in the basic duty of the job.
Joe Biden's condemnation of the violence stands in direct contrast to Donald Trump, who spent all day yesterday tweeting praise for his supporters who rode in open trucks waving flags and seems reminiscent of faraway wars. From the Washington Post, quote, scenes of Trump faithful firing paint and pellet guns at protesters during a Trump cruise rally caravan through downtown Portland, a liberal bastion that has been the site of weeks of street demonstrations, raised the specter that the nation's summer of unrest has entered a new phase in which the president's backers are rallying to defend businesses and fight back against Black Lives Matter and other groups he has labeled anarchists and terrorists. The Portland mayor accusing Trump of inciting the violence after a man was shot and killed there amid those clashes between that pro-Trump caravan and Black Lives Matter protesters on Saturday.
He encouraged them to come into our community, and previously he has actually encouraged or at least tacitly approved of violence. The tweets that he has been putting out in the last 48 hours attacking Democratic mayors, attacking those who are trying to bring resolution to the violence in their local communities. He has an opportunity to uplift us and bring us together and help us move through this difficult situation in our nation's history, and instead he chooses to play petty politics and divide us.
That Donald Trump approves of and incites and encourages violence is beyond dispute. It was he who said that he could shoot people on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. It was Donald Trump who encouraged states to, quote, liberate themselves from his own government's recommended stay-at-home orders. He's the one who's called for roughing up protesters at his own events, and he has said that he would pay the legal bills for anyone who got in trouble for doing so. It is that record of inciting violence and division that drove the Wisconsin governor and Kenosha mayor to say Trump is not welcome in their city at this time, stating his presence would not be helpful to a city in the process of healing. Trump, however, doubled down on his plans to visit after their calls and will go to Kenosha tomorrow to survey damage from last week's protests and meet with law enforcement. As of now, there is no meeting scheduled for the president to speak with Jacob Blake's family. With the country on its knees, suffering from a deadly pandemic that Trump failed to stop and weakened economically from Trump's failures to protect it, Trump sees his path to victory paved by scaring people into blaming someone other than him for the chaos he unleashed. Reality versus Trump's amplification of division is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former U.S. Senator from Missouri and current MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill's here. Also joining us, Democratic strategist Basil Smikle and White House reporter for the LA Times, Eli Stokols. Eli, I want to start with you. And I wonder if you could just take anyone that was doing a little mental decluttering after the convention last week through the weekend of events as the things grew more tense in the streets of Portland. Donald Trump torqued up his divisive distribution of tweets to his millions of supporters. And through today, after local leaders called for him to stay away, insisted that he's coming.
Well, if we go back all the way to Thursday, the day that the president accepted the Republican nomination, Joe Biden was out there saying this seems to be a president who was rooting for violence. And he pointed to the comments by Kellyanne Conway during a television interview in which she said, this stuff helps us. That's pretty much what she said. And Democrats have been seizing on it ever since. Now, Trump went out that night on the White House South Lawn and gave a pretty buttoned up speech for him after capping off a 4-day RNC that every night in prime time featured a lot of efforts by women, by black voices to soften the president's edges and to paint a picture of a president that we all know is far rosier and kinder than this president actually is day to day. And then Friday, the president goes up to New Hampshire and holds a rally and is right back to being his more incendiary self, talking about the protesters, basically dismissing all of them as a mob and really going back to the fear mongering that is at the heart of his campaign pitch that was maybe toned down a little bit during the RNC. And then on Sunday, after playing some golf, the president just, really having an active day on Twitter and tweeting and retweeting a lot of messages aimed at stirring up fears about these protests that he continues to define by pointing to the most violent elements out there in order to dismiss entirely the cause underlying it, the Black Lives Matter cause, the calls to redress systemic racism. He is painting over all of that and saying, look at these protesters. They want to defund the police. That's the campaign strategy. And it's remarkable to watch because today at the White House, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany was asked about the president, his responsibility for inflaming some of this violence by encouraging his own supporters to take to the streets. And she said that he hasn't seen the Trump supporters in the back of the pickup trucks going through the streets of Portland and firing paintballs and other ammunitions at the Black Lives Matter protesters. Trump himself retweeted video of just that on Sunday. She was asked, what does he make of the 17-year-old in Kenosha, the apparent Trump supporter, Kyle Rittenhouse, whose social media was littered with pro-Trump posts, a video of himself at a January Trump rally. This is the person accused of shooting and killing two people who were protesting Jacob Blake's shooting in Kenosha. And the press secretary just said, we don't have any comment on that. So there is a real selectivity here in picking out the elements of this that they believe, the White House, the campaign believe, benefit the president politically and ignoring pretty much everything else. And that, I think, is what former Vice President Joe Biden was trying to highlight, some of these inconsistencies. That's what he was trying to highlight when he spoke today in Pittsburgh.
Claire, let me show you some more of that speech that Eli's talking about, Vice President Joe Biden today in Pittsburgh.
You know me. You know my heart. You know my story, my family story. Ask yourself, do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? Really? I want a safe America, safe from COVID, safe from crime and looting, safe from racially motivated violence, safe from bad cops. Let me be crystal clear. Safe from 4 more years of Donald Trump. Now, in just a little over 60 days, we have a decision to make. Will we rid ourselves of this toxin? Or will we make a permanent part? We make it a permanent part of our nation's character.
That's some strong stuff from Joe Biden. Claire McCaskill.
Yeah, I think what happened, we have entered the phase of the campaign where there's a lot of hand-wringing by supporters. and there's a lot of pressure. And in this instance, I think that pressure was felt by the campaign. And I think Joe Biden realized he had to get out there and he had to go on offense. I mean, and by the way, he's going to have to do this every day. They can't just give one speech and think that's going to work.
Totally agree with you. Yeah.
Donald Trump is going to be on his little machine with his thumbs, retweeting white nationalists, retweeting falsehoods every single day incessantly. So they're going to have to do it. They're going to have to say over and over again that Joe Biden is not for rioters. He is not for people who set fires or burn buildings or break windows. But here's the thing, Nicolle, that I think is really interesting about this. The visuals here matter. America knows that Trump is ginning up this chaos. They know that. They can tell it. They can smell it, that he wants this conflict. And the suburban women that are supposedly at play here and that Trump is trying to say you should be afraid, you know what they see? They see all his supporters with AR-15s. They see a 17-year-old going into a volatile situation with a long gun and killing people. You know, and I was reminded over the weekend by about one of my favorite Johnny Cash songs, "Don't take your gun to town." Trump is saying to these people, take your gun to town. Let's see if we can have a rumble. And, you know, the American suburban women, they see that. And they don't like everybody having an AR-15. That's part of the problem in America right now.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.